Okay, so here we go, part 5. And it's about dowsing and radionics. And I've already mentioned this, but this is really important when you're dowsing or using radionics. That you have to seek, you have to ask, you have to knock, and where the attention goes, the energy flows. I've added to this, prejudice is the enemy of truth. Now the skeptic, you'll see people that pretend to be skeptics and you can't prove that dowsing works in their presence or anywhere connected with their awareness. But they're actually cynics. The cynic has his mind made up. And there's no way you're going to change that. So he believes whatever it is he believes, and he's going to debunk your dowsing or these sort of things. And he's just as powerful as you are in that regard. And so he'll bugger the experiment. And this was true of there's a famous case of Jacques Benveniste, who was working with homeopathics, and this guy from Skeptical Inquirer, Randy the Magician, went to extremes to invalidate his experiments and succeeded, because basically the cynic doesn't want to see. He doesn't want to see that it works. He wants to see that it doesn't work. So that's what he sees. So this is a couple books that might be of use. The Divining Hand. This is was written by Christopher Bird, who was my next door neighbor over here in Blairsville, was married to my present wife, who is Shabri Bird. So, a couple books. This is something that I encountered. The human nervous system is working like an antenna. Only it's got a wavelength of between 7.8 and 8 hertz. Now different people are going to have a little bit different wavelength based on how much nerve fiber is in their physical makeup. But basically it's somewhere in that band, and it's between 23,250 and 24,233 miles of nerve fiber in the human body. So at that, with that basis then, we can ask any question we want and get a valid answer. The information is out there. Why do we call it information? Because it's what's surrounding us that informs us. So our form is related to those things that are around us. Now, back in 2,500 years ago, the Buddha taught that there are 17 trillion thought events per second. That's a lot of thought events, but it's going on below the level of our awareness. And we couldn't handle being conscious of all of those thoughts. And that's why we use dowsing. Dowsing allows us to tap into this sort of on a subconscious basis. And when you've got that much going on, you have to write your intention, a clear intention of what you're asking when you dowse. That's a very important aspect of dowsing, is to clearly state your intention. So We checked this out with biofeedback back when I was studying psychology, and it's pretty clear that the Buddha was right on about his math. There's that much going on in the human system. Now, I oftentimes use a prayer of intent, see? You have to be clear what you ask for. You have to be aware that you involuntarily look for both your hopes and your fears. So dowsing about your love life that you really got a lot invested in terms of hopes and fears is notoriously not a good thing to douse. People douse to find gold. One of the fellows that attended our school out there in California in educative psychology actually paid his tuition and expenses by map dowsing out in the Nevada desert for gold, and he never found enough to go nuts and, go get off track, but he found enough to go back to school for another 6 or 8 months. And so he was dowsing for gold. And the purpose that he was dowsing for was no doubt a purpose that subconsciously then he allowed himself to find the gold. I also use a prayer of intent, and the prayer of intent I state like this: if it be thy will, let the powers of nature converge to increase and enhance beneficial energies and transform any detrimental energies into beneficial ones within the boundaries as marked for now and in the future for as long as is appropriate. In deep gratitude. This is probably the most important part of this intention, because nature responds to our feelings. It doesn't respond to our thoughts. So when we feel that feeling of deep gratitude, nature gets on board and follows our intents.
That sounds a lot like the prayer that I learned from Joey Corn.
That's exactly where it came from.
That's where it came from?
Yeah, that's where it came from. So, and I thought that was very cluey of Joey. Joey is one of the best dowsing teachers I've encountered.
Yeah.
So, now this is what I call a Dowsing Fan Chart. Other people may call it something else, I don't know. But you can dowse with a pendulum, which I use. Now my pendulum, I've got a short chain on it because I'm an impatient dowser. And it works faster with a shorter chain. If I get a long chain on it, I have time to think about it, and that isn't very good for dowsing. But, whoops, I inadvertently changed the picture there. So, basically, I'll use this Dowsing Fan Chart. Now, I'll set up a radionic program to do something or other, and I always want that program. I'll think, oh, well, there's something else. I'll set up the program. The first thing I think of, which might be a biodynamic preparation, it could be a color, it could be a cell salt, it could be a variety of things, and I'll say, well, I've got this problem there, I've got manganese deficiency in the corn, let's say. And so I want to correct this with a radionic treatment, and I'll, with my fan chart, see, I swing the pendulum here and let it drift to wherever it wants to go, and that'll tell me percents of effectiveness. So if I do nothing, what percent of effectiveness will my intention have? So I'll douse for that. Might be just having intention, might be 10% effect. But I want more than that. I want to fix the manganese deficiency in my corn. And something's going on, see, and the digestive activity around the plant's roots isn't giving off manganese, or the plant isn't taking it up, or something like that. So I'll say, oh, well, manganese, I could just take a sample of manganese sulfate, and I can put it in the witness there, and then douse and see if I project the pattern of manganese sulfate, how effective will that be? Well, that might be 60% effective, a lot more effective than just the intent. But I'm putting that pattern out there with my radionic treatment. I'll use the map, or I'll use a sample of corn, or I might be treating an animal. See, I'll treat a cow for mastitis or whatever it is. So I'll put that in the witness center, but I'll check and see where I get to with that. Well, 60% is a whole lot like less than 100%. So I'll keep adding things. I might find the right color or frequency, or I might find, you know, manganese is a cofactor of silicon, and if there's not enough silicon out there, the manganese can't work in the plant. And so I'll say, well, what if I put diatomaceous earth as one of the patterns, and I'll project that pattern out, and it gets to 75% effective. And I keep going until I get over 100%. How do you get over 100%? Well, you do. Because in reality, what your program is, everybody who does any sort of battle planning in the Army, they've got their battle plans and everything. But when the bullets start flying, then battle plans go out the window. You know, it doesn't turn out the way you imagine. So you want to go over 100% just to ensure that you get 95%. You hear what I'm saying? So I'll work this out to where, look, I was in the dairy operation. We were treating a couple dairy cows in Tasmania for an unknown disease. We didn't know what it was. It kind of acted like pneumonia. We found out through our crime scene investigation, we found out that the affected animals had been snacking on water hemlock in the alleyway between pastures. And this leads to paralysis, first of the respiratory system. We thought maybe they had pneumonia. See, we didn't understand. But treating them for pneumonia with antibiotics didn't have any effect, because that wasn't the cause. And one of them was an absolute prize dairy cow of the herd. We didn't want to lose her. We wanted to get some calves out of her. So we're coming up with, we've got sheets of different cards. I've designed a radionic instrument that works off of cards. And so we've got sheets of cards of different homeopathics. There's about 3,000 different homeopathics that have been translated into cards. And you put the card in the card reader slot on the instrument, and the instrument can do 4 cards at once, and you can connect 2 instruments together and do 8 cards. Anyway, we were like looking for different things, and we found in the Australian flower essence cards, of which there's easily 100 Australian flower essences, and we're doing a sheet. There's 9 cards to the sheet, and we're doing sheet after sheet. Just check, does this sheet have a card on it that will help the cow? And then we'd narrow it down to 1 or 2 cards on that sheet. So we're looking at we're trying to find out. And this was part of the investigation that led us to find out that it was water hemlock. You know, that's the poison that Socrates drank. So we developed a program. Some of these things, it went around like to 270%. It's like, wow, we didn't know we could even get that high. The things that we came up with. We took like vitamins for human consumption, and that was part of the treatment. This instrument that I designed has both a well and a card slot, so you can do both of them at once or whatever. So we developed a treatment, and we saved those cows. The next day, the less affected cow was up and eating and back in the milk lineup. The other one was closer to death and was more severely affected. And it took her a week to get to where she was eating well again. But wow, we went way over 100%. So this is just one of the things that I use. See, I've got colors in this dowsing chart.
Hugh, what is the ring between the alphabet and the numbers? Your second ring?
It doesn't have anything in it. Well, you could put whatever you wanted in there, you know?
The sound?
Sounds.
Well, it could.
As much as you do with sounds.
As I say, you could put anything you wanted on this dowsing chart, and it's just a way of letting your subconscious find the right thing. So this is just one of the tools that I use in agriculture, but you could use it for a lot of things. I'm sure you could use it for medical diagnosis if you knew what you were doing. So you'd put all your different conditions on this chart, and then you'd dowse to see which conditions are involved. And you know, we're so used to single factor analysis in science and in medicine that we want to find the remedy. But chances are it's a complex of different patterns. Now this is what I do for a bioassay of the soil. I do this with my Dowsing Fan Chart in percents, and I can take a soil sample or a farm sample with a picture of the farm aerial photo and dowse it real quick there, and it takes me about a half an hour to get through all these readings. That's one of the reasons I like a short chain on my pendulum. So it's really amazing what you can come up with in terms of in terms of dowsing. You can find out things, providing that your hopes and fears don't get in the way. You have to be just really unprejudiced. When I'm dowsing, I usually ask, show me. That's the dowsing question I use usually. Yes, sir.
Why do you have to know what the cause is? Why not just douse for the solution no matter what the cause happens to be?
Oh, okay. Well, we've done that. You know, there was a lady who swallowed a fly. And so she swallowed a spider to catch the fly. But then she had to swallow a mouse to catch the spider, and then she had to swallow a rat to catch the mouse, and a cat to catch the rat, and so on and so forth. And by the time she swallowed a horse, she died, of course. And this is a children's rhyme, you know? So finding the solution that's what we've been doing in agriculture. We've got this fertility problem, so we put NPK fertilizers on it. And then the next thing you know, we've got some insect or disease that decides it wants to come in out of nowhere and eat that crop. And so we use some kind of poison to get rid of the insect or the disease, some fungicide or whatever. And this locks up zinc or manganese or something else in the soil, and it causes another problem. And then we address that problem, and at this point we're putting out GMO crops. And
Okay.
mind you, Monsanto had the idea that they could tell people whatever they wanted to hear. So they told the university people, oh, we're going to have GMO soybeans Roundup ready, and we'll decrease the use of herbicides with them. Well, the Roundup ready soybean is so that you can really pour the herbicide to the field and the soybeans survive.
This wasn't-
So it's like what you've done in finding the solution is actually a greater problem than what you address with the solution. You have to find the cause behind the cause behind the cause in order to stop that whole chain of destruction that very easily can develop.
I'll talk to you afterward about this.
Okay, all right. And this is something I used to make cards, so I can put my card with a stylus and guide, and it's 360 degrees, and I can put the sample of what I want to find the pattern for in the top, and then I'll find the pattern by dowsing in the bottom and make marks through the guide, and I'll get the pattern of that, whatever it is, so that I can actually use this. What I've done here actually is started out with a pencil and made 8 circuits continuous. There's something about the number 8 that's transcendental.
It's transformative.
Yeah, so it's an infinity side stood up. So there's really something to that. And so I can take whatever's in the top and have it reflected in the bottom. Now this is a projection wheel. This is paper radionics. And basically I'm organizing the light with this diagram. This sometimes called an iris. So you can see how the light is intensified in the center. So you just print it off on a piece of paper and you can put your farm map there with whatever cards or remedies or whatever in between the iris and the map, and actually have the map as the recipient, and it's entangled with the actual property, and you can put out your remedies radionically over any distance and have it immediately affect the property. But mind you, it's like Arthur's device that I showed you. It's taken me, it just doesn't immediately have an effect, you know. It's gradual because you're essentially vibrating the human body into a somewhat different form. And so you're affecting it, but it's got a lot of inertia, you might say. So I wear it, you know, I wear it to bed. I wear it nearly all the time. And the cumulative effect is really profound. But the effect that I have from moment to moment is very little change. So sometimes your treatment has to take a while.
What are you putting in the middle?
I'm putting in cards, my radionic cards. There was a radionic pioneer by the name of Malcolm Ray in England, and he developed that card system, and that's the system that I'm using. I'm using Malcolm Ray cards, or Malcolm Ray type cards, because I make cards too.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me like on the cards he's putting the degrees.
Yeah, there's
The
sector
dial.
marks, yeah.
That gives you the numbers, the number code for each section.
Presumably, you could do it with a computer and a number code, and incidentally, when I do computer radionics, it's all, binary, numbers, but it translates into all sorts of pictures and things like that, patterns. This is a picture of Albert Abrams, who's considered to be the father or the discoverer of radionics. Abrams was a teenager when he inherited millions of dollars, one of the gold fortunes in California, and had a passion for medicine and wanted to become a medical doctor, and studied medicine in his early teens and so forth, but there was no way they were going to license him as a physician at the age of 16, So he learned German and went to Heidelberg and studied medicine. And in Heidelberg, he met up with and became friends with one of the great physicists of that time, Hermann Helmholtz. And Helmholtz was passionately investigating electromagnetism. He had encountered the work of Maxwell and Faraday, and he was the mentor of Heinrich Hertz, who Hertzian waves were named after. And so Abrams thought that he had discovered some electrical phenomenon, some electromagnetic phenomenon, and didn't realize that there's an etheric phenomenon that's working in the same fashion, only it's organizational instead of disorganizational. So electromagnetism and our electromagnetic devices, look, you just stick a fork in the wall socket and you can see how disorganizational that energy can be. Anyway, it's a long story. This is a picture of Ruth Drown, who developed actually a radionic camera that could take pictures of internal organs in the body at any distance. You could call her up on the telephone and she could photograph your liver. And she was persecuted and put in jail where she died. This was Galen Hieronymus, who lived down the road here not too far away, and one of the great early pioneers in radionics. The only person who got a U.S. patent on a radionic instrument. This is a Rogers instrument, which is the same sort of design as it was based on the Hieronymus instrument. This is the Hieronymus analyzer. I own this. My Hieronymus analyzer is in Australia. It's not something I'd go back and forth across the ocean with. I took a radionic instrument once in my backpack, and every place where they checked out, in airport security, I had to unload it and show them what it was. So it really took me a long time to go through airport security, and I haven't done that since. So they'd say, well, what is it? And I'd say, oh, it's an experimental agricultural device. And, and then that would shut them up. And
You realize that Hieronymus was called by NASA to use his device to monitor the men on the moon?
yeah, on the far side of the
Yeah,
moon.
on the far side.
Yeah. And these are various, this particular one here, this is the one of my design, and it's made here in Lakemont, Georgia. So this is a Kelly instrument. These are Kelly instruments, KRT analyzer. And these are some of the cards, the Malcolm Ray type cards. These are cards of biodynamic preparations. I find these very applicable to agriculture. And it's really, really easy to use this. I can take the farm map out and I can say, oh, we've just had 3 weeks of rain, or we're having 3 weeks of rain. And I can put my horsetail and oak bark preparations out there, and I don't get a nitrate flush. And it's like if I get waterlogged, I can put hydrogen peroxide in the instrument and broadcast the pattern of hydrogen peroxide, and everything stays green. It doesn't suffer from lack of oxygen in the soil because I'm putting out the pattern that's got free oxygen. And we've done this with fields that were flooded in Australia, and they greened right up again where all the neighbors' fields were still showing the effects of the flood a month later, but not the area that was treated. And so this is a very easy to apply, very cheap. You don't use anything up. You stick the card in there, you take it out, you use it over again. You don't use anything up. You're just using the pattern. See, you have a dance, and people come to the dance and they stand around and talk to each other and so on and so forth. But when the music starts, then people can dance. They're not going to dance without the music. Well, how much does the music weigh? What's the substance of the music? It doesn't have any substance. It doesn't have any weight. It might have volume, but it's essential to the organization that we call a dance. And basically that's how radionics is working, is it's working like the music at the dance.
How do those little lines work?
Those are sector marks. So in, say, this is drawn with AutoCAD, which is a computer program that I can translate my dowsing card into a printed card that's, the lines all have the same weight and that sort of thing. But I can find whatever degree that is, and I can put the line in with the computer then, and it's very nicely done. It's precision. But that would be the patterns. The energy is coming through the reader, and it's reading that pattern, and it'll put out that pattern then, see?
So my question was, how is that pattern a pattern of that particular element?
Well, I tried to explain this with the eightfold lemniscate. So I'll put the preparation in the top and then derive the pattern of the card at the bottom by dowsing.
So you'll just douse those positions?
I douse those positions, and then I end up with a pattern card. Now it's interesting, those marks are all working together. So one mark is related to all the other marks on the card. And someone else dowsing it might get a different pattern, but they're getting a relationship of those lines that is uniquely related to that preparation, whatever it is. This is biodynamic horn manure being made. The cow horn is filled with cow manure and buried over the winter. And this is working with the gravitational, the lime side of things, and it's working with the tone ether and the life ether. This is a picture of horn clay. This is some that was made in New Zealand, and I was there for a workshop, and I had previously given a workshop there and mentioned the possibility of making horn clay. So the farmer had made the horn clay, and we dug it up at this workshop, and you can see that it had a lot of mycorrhizal fungi in it. It was just full of mycorrhizal fungi, and that's very appropriate to this preparation. It was a really good example of that preparation. That particular preparation works on the sap flow and the root exudation, and basically in agriculture you have to have a dynamic interplay between what goes on above ground and what goes on below. And we usually think in agriculture that we ought to think about the soil, and we don't consider that photosynthesis and blossoming and fruiting and ripening are all atmospheric processes, whereas the mineral release, the nitrogen fixation, the digestion, and the nutrient uptake are all soil processes. So the process that's going on is that dynamic interplay between the photosynthesis and the blossoming, fruiting, and ripening, and the mineral release and the nitrogen fixation and the digestion and nutrient uptake going on in the soil. And we're really farming both the soil and the atmosphere. Yes.
I'm still trying to make all these preparations and all, and I did my first manure, cow manure. Actually, I used my
Horn
donkey
manure.
manure because she was lactating.
Uh-huh.
So I buried
Yep.
that last fall,
Yep.
but I had not yet dug it up this spring. Is it?
Oh,
just
wow.
still dig it
Yeah,
up?
usually
Well, I
you dig it
have-
up by
I know.
Ascension Day.
I know. That's just my life, but
Well,
still dig it up and just.
oh, I would, yeah.
Okay, Joyce,
It's,
you do it.
it's, and if you're in any doubt, dig it up now, store it away in the cellar, and bury it again next year. I mean, this autumn, you know, and go over into next year. Some very nice horn manure has been made by burying it for 2 or 3 winters, not just one. So it's like we get these ideas when we're working with a recipe that there's no room for, you know, for variation. But I think that's really not a very good idea. But it comes from the notion that you don't really know how it works, so then you try to follow the recipe as close as you can. Once you've got an idea of how it works, so you do that in the kitchen. Once you know what that recipe is supposed to be about, then you can substitute ingredients, and if this ingredient isn't very strong in this particular case, you can add a little bit more and so forth. And then the horn silica, and this is working with the levitational forces. You know, when the sunlight hits the leaf, it creates an electrical tension that goes all the way to the roots in the plant, and it's that electrical tension that's drawing up the water and electrolytes through the plant. So when the sun goes down, then that tension relaxes, and then the plant gives off its root exudates overnight. So what's working, see, the flows all follow the sun. When the sun's below the horizon, though, the flows are toward the soil. When the sun's above the horizon, the flows are towards the apex of the plant. So that's just how things work. This is the Yarrow Preparation. We take a male deer's bladder and stuff it full of yarrow flowers and sew it up, and you hang it up. You hang it up in the sun all summer and above head high, because the etheric, like atmospheric processes are stronger up there. But you have to protect it from the birds. They'll be attracted to it and they'll be flying into it and pecking it and all the rest of these sorts of things. So you put it in a cotton sock and hold it up there. And it organizes the sulfur and the potash in the soil. Then the chamomile preparation. You know, chamomile is what you use when you have acid reflux. We're running out of time here, but this is one of the things that you can have in the soil. The soil can have the equivalent of acid reflux, and chamomile will get the digestion in the soil to working the way it should. So this preparation is the cow's intestine with chamomile flowers in it, buried over the winter. And then this one here is stinging nettle, and the earthworms love stinging nettle, so you have to protect it and put it in the container and screen the ends so that the earthworms don't carry it all away. And then this is the oak bark preparation. It's oak bark in an animal's skull. This is the cow's skull, see the horn? And I've buried it in a wet weather spring on my farm in Georgia and put a big rock on it because dogs are intensely attracted to it and they will haul it away. So, but you want that water that's coming out of the hillside in the autumn and winter. That's the nitrate season of the year, and this particular preparation reduces nitrates. And then the dandelion preparation. This is in the cow's mesentery. So dandelion flowers in the cow's mesentery. This is the process for getting beautiful fruit. So this one here is working in the atmosphere where the chamomile is working in the soil. So you get good fruit set and good size and beauty in the fruit. It's just everything fills out the way it ought to with this one. Valerian, this is a plant where Valium was discovered, and so it's really good for muscle relaxation in human health. But in the plant, this is a phosphorus process, and the phosphorus process in plants is a bridge between lime and silica. Phosphorus works in between lime and silica. It's the bridge in the chemistry of the plant. It's that way in our muscles too. But when the muscles are tensed by the silica activity that's happening with the nerve system, then you get a cramp and you can't relax, and you need the lime to push it back. And it's not connected if there's insufficient phosphorus, if the phosphorus process isn't working properly. So to get it to work properly, this is the plant, Valerian. So it really connects the phosphorus in the plant's processes just as it would in our muscular process. And horsetail is one of these plants that is intensely siliceous, and sometimes it can grow as a weed and be almost impossible to eradicate in fields. But it's the best of protection against all sorts of fungal diseases. It's not a fungicide. There's nothing poisonous about it. It doesn't kill fungi. It makes the plant strong enough to resist fungal infection, because cell walls and connective tissues are siliceous tissues. And if they're strong enough, if there's good enough cell walls and connective tissues, you don't get fungal diseases.
Does it become invasive then so you wouldn't want to plant it along a waterway?
In some cases, it might become invasive. I've tried on several occasions to plant it on my farm. I've tried those kinds of places. And every time the cows got out, they ate it. And I never succeeded in growing it on my farm. I mean, it grew, but it didn't live very long.
It does wonders for your nails.
Oh gosh, yeah, hair, nails. In fact, it's in shampoos and things like that. And these are rates for your Hieronymus type instrument for those preparations. And I know you can't take the time to study this. These are rates for common homeopathics for the Hieronymus type instrument. And one of the most important things that I'd like to emphasize about the use of radionics in agriculture is keep records of what you did and put both the time and the place in your records, because the influences of the sun and moon and stars are constantly changing. The planets are in different relationships with each other at all times, and you can go back and look and see what it was, if it worked or if it didn't work, and you can see the astrology. Not that you can go out there and change the astrology, but you can at least see what it was. So doing something when the moon is in the constellation Capricorn is going to be different than if you did it a few hours earlier when the moon was still in Sagittarius. So that's also of importance. But keeping records is I think is an essential thing. This is a field broadcaster. This was something that was an idea that Hieronymus originated. And I had found that Hieronymus, his design was only working on the soil. And that to have this work in a balanced way, it had to be changed so that it worked on both the atmosphere and the soil. So those preparations that work on the atmosphere that enhance photosynthesis, blossoming, fruiting, and ripening go in the upper well, and the lower well has got the ones that are working with the soil processes. And the biggest problem that we've had with these is hitting them with a tractor, or the cows they can feel it. You might not feel it, but a cow can from over the top of the hill, and will come and make love to it. You know, this is a cow's way of doing it. And it doesn't take too much of that before it snaps off. So you can see that was a good corral. And this is showing you how ginger as a plant is working. It's got 3 different kinds of roots. It's got these tubers. It's got these mineral uptake roots. But it also has these nitrogen fixation roots, these fat roots, that it's putting its sugars into and feeding the nitrogen fixation in the root. So ginger is one of my favorite crops for getting the nitrogen fixation working really well in the soil.
So that is a special root that is it's a subway downward. It just reports downward, it doesn't up.
That's right, and doesn't branch really or anything like that. See, it comes off the side of the corm here, and it goes straight down, and at the very tip, you can't see it in this picture, it makes a little sort of a bud. It doesn't taste like anything. It doesn't taste like ginger.
So you don't eat that part? You
don't eat that part, no. You wouldn't be happy with that. But it's storing the essence of ginger in these tubers. So you can see here, this is a picture of the soil after a ginger crop when I dug the ginger. Then look at how porous the soil has become. all the earthworm activity. You can see earthworms. It's just really opened up the soil. This soil, when I like dug up the bed to plant it in ginger, it was like I wore out a shoe stepping on the shovel. It was really, really compacted, hard soil. So it's one of my favorite soil improvement crops is ginger. I didn't know, nobody knew that you could grow ginger here in Georgia, in North Georgia, in the coldest part of Georgia. And I tried it, and the first time I did, I gave it some compost, and I grew ginger that was maybe as big as my thumb. Definitely not as big as those roots you see in the supermarket. But I thought, well, I'll give it more compost. So the next year I gave it twice as much compost, and I grew ginger as big as my little finger. And I thought, well, that didn't work. And so the next time I planted it where I didn't give it anything but just mulch. And then it made beautiful roots. I've got a lot of ginger out of it. And then the year after that, I planted it in totally new land that I had never farmed before, and it bloomed. It got so wound up that it bloomed. Plants don't bloom until they reach a certain level of energy that they have enough energy to give it off, because pollen and nectar both are giving off the plant's energy. But it didn't bloom until it built up enough energy. So anyway, it's a great soil improvement crop, one of my favorites. And this is just a picture of what happens when you get things really cooking. See, 4 and 5 leaf clovers. That one's a 5. That one's a 5. This is a 4. This is what you're talking about when you see a lucky farm. That farm will be really fertile. The embryonic development of the leaf in the clover, you'll get twinning. On a farm like this, your cows will have twins. This is not good news for most dairy farmers. But I've seen this, of all the dairy farmers I've worked with in Australia, the one with the most 4-leaf and 5-leaf clovers has an exceptional amount of twins in his herd. And usually the twins, you'll get a boy and a girl, and the girl will be a free martin. She will be infertile. So this is not something dairy farmers look forward to. So not a good idea for a dairy farm, but just about every other kind of farm. Yeah.
I think I read that the clover up north is fine for consumption. The clover down the same route that going south at a certain point gets toxic. Is that a soil thing, or is that a...
This can happen. It's not dependent on north or south, but where the residues from growing the clover, they're high protein. Clover will be 24% protein maybe. So anything that, like the cows graze it, and they trample some and it gets digested back into the soil. And those amino acids and those proteins under wet conditions will nitrify, and then you'll get milk fever, you can get bloating. You turn your cows out in a wet clover pasture in the summer here in Georgia, and there's nitrates in the pasture, and then you come out, maybe you turned them out 8 o'clock in the morning, you come out at 10 and you've got legs in the air, and you've got a big job digging a big hole to bury your cows. And yeah, that's real unfortunate. And that can happen, but it's always a nitrate problem. You just don't get as much of that happening further north. Look, I've spent 40 years like finding out things that are not in the textbooks and all this sort of stuff, like solving mysteries in agriculture. And this is an example of using radionics on a farm. This is a produce farm, and this was a zucchini plant. And you can see the first zucchini, we found out that we had to put in extra boron a couple of weeks before the first flower appeared in order to get the fruit to fill out all the way to the end. On this one, we missed it just a little bit. It did fill out the end, but it's a little smaller at the end. But none of the rest of them will be that way. But look at it, look at all the fruits that's on this plant. There's just like so many fruits on this plant. It's almost isn't funny.
Physically
So-
put boron in, or are you?
We physically put boron in, but we also used our 506 and the 507 to promote blossoming and fruiting.
So you put energetic boron.
Well, we did that because the 506 dandelion is a boron collecting plant.
Really?
Yeah. There's a few plants with deep roots,
Yeah.
like alfalfa will collect boron. Burdock will collect boron. Boron affects sap pressure. It intensifies the suction the plant makes on the soil, and it creates fluid flow. It really stimulates fluid flow in the plant.
Yeah,
Well-
did you say it had 4 electrons, the boron did?
No, the boron has 3 reactive electrons and silica has 4, and the boron gets in there and reacts with the silica, and that leaves the silica looking for something to do with its 4th electron, and that's what creates the suction on the water and electrolytes.
So dandelion for humans, dandelion and horsetail would be very good.
Yeah, but horsetail's not particularly a boron collector,
No,
it's a silica collector.
Yes, so if you mix them together, you would get a reaction there.
Oh yeah, you do.
And you would change, if the human ate those, it would change the intercellular and the intracellular pressures in the body.
Yeah, it will. It will. One of the things is that silica and nitrate affect each other. They're antagonists. And so when you've got a lot of nitrate, it flushes the silica out of the plant. So you want to use your oak bark preparation to reduce the nitrates, to get them back in amino form. And you want to use the horsetail to provide the silica availability, so that you restore the silica activity while you have reduced the nitrates. And it can be very effective radionically.
Thank you.
And just a few more slides. This shows you apples. The apple grower uses radionics every morning and every evening, and what a beautiful apple crop. This was oranges. This is bananas. When you set this many hands of bananas, this is Cavendish banana growing in my backyard in Australia. And I think this one had, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyway, it had about 11 or 12 hands of bananas. You get that much, a big bunch of bananas, and the workers on your banana plantation will So So we measure everything in kilos over in Australia, and you get a 65 kilo bunch of bananas, and you get complaints from your workers. And this is potatoes, and this particular potato crop, we were putting silica out as a diatomaceous earth product along with the homeopathic patterns for horsetail and for horn silica. And when we harvested these potatoes, the potato vines were still standing up, and they were dead and dry, but they were still standing up. And those potatoes, we kept them, we kept some of them under a heavy tarp. This is at 17 degrees south latitude now. This is tropics. And the summertime, of course, is December and January. And we harvested in September, and I took potatoes to friends when I visited them for Christmas, which is hot as bloody hell in Australia. And I took sacks of these, like 20 kilo sacks, which is about 44 pounds. And I took them, and not a rotten potato in the bag, stored without any refrigeration or anything of that sort, just under a heavy tarp in the barn. Still nice and firm potatoes, and not a rotten potato in the bag. And this is starting to show signs of sprouting, but the sprouts were real stocky and short. So it's just growing a quality potato.
Do you know if there's any difference in the formation of what is the poison on the skin? On the biodynamic potatoes versus regularly organic grown potatoes? The skin with light turns into a poison. So
Yeah, there's a cyanide compound caused by that, and that could be caused also with these potatoes, only the heavy tarp blocked all the sunshine. That's why we stored them under a heavy tarp.
Right.
But mind you, the potatoes, because they were grown without any nitrogen fertilizer, we got our nitrogen out of the air. And you could cut the potato in half and leave it on the counter, and it wouldn't discolor in a week. Most of your organic potatoes are grown with something like chicken manure, and they're full of nitrates, and you cut the potato in half and it's discolored in 15 minutes. That also influences the flavor. I have had people tell me, I believe that's the first time I ever tasted a real potato. So it really is a measure of quality to get your nitrogen through the biological processes of nature rather than out of a bag. And that was the last slide. So.
Your application of these radionics, these treatments, morning and evening?
Yeah, morning and evening, it makes good sense. It's more effective because the sun is close to the horizon, so you're affecting the plant and the soil at that time. When the sun's directly overhead or directly at midnight, then your influences aren't focused really on the horizon and the soil.
And then your application of the treatments is through which?
Yeah, we use a map.
Reference?
Use a map of the farm or the map of that field or the other field or whatever, if you've got different fields and blocks. So you can take an aerial map of those and just use that. Yeah, use that as a witness.
The map?
The map, yeah. And you can download these things from Google Earth these days, print them out, laminate them, have them on your desk, you know, oh, we're going to do with that with this. And you get up in the morning before breakfast, set up your radionic program, put it on a timer, go on about your business, come back in the evening before supper, and do it again. And that tends to really address a lot of problems that otherwise you couldn't do anything about. But you can get the closest thing I've ever seen to perfect crops this way.
Is this in your book?
Yeah, I mean, it was an attempt to put it in the book. I don't know how well it did, but the book is full of all kinds of information. It's not a weekend read.
Are you using the biodynamic calendar of Maria Theoden's?
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, when I studied quantum physics in university, I was also taking astrophysics.
So you're studying the astrology?
So, yeah, I told my faculty advisor, he says, what do you want to take that for? You know, I says, well, if I'm going to study elementary particles, well, then I want to study, you know, quasars and, you know, galaxies and things. And because, you know, I wanted to get, and he says, if you keep doing that, I already had so many electives it wasn't funny. And he says, if you keep doing that, he says, you'll never graduate. Well, that was prophetic. I told him, I says, I didn't come here to get a diploma, I came here to get an education. And he said, oh, all right.
Thank you, Hugh.
Okay, this is the end.
Thank you.